Welcome to AI and Automation in Action, where we show business leaders how to turn AI from a buzzword into measurable operational leverage. This podcast is for CEOs, COOs, and technology decision makers who are tired of manual processes, disconnected systems, and underperforming teams, and want to deploy AI and automation in a way that is scalable, secure, and compliant. In every episode, we dissect real client implementations, the architecture, the tools, the integration strategy, and the governance controls, so you can see exactly what works in the real world. If you're serious about operational efficiency and responsible AI adoption, you're in the right place.
Well, hey there, Hunter. Appreciate you joining us again for our next edition of use case scenarios when it comes to AI and automation. So this week we're going to be diving into a use case specifically around a managed service provider, or what's called in the industry as an MSP. Our history is we've got an MSP ourselves, been in business for a little over 25 years. And so we're connected with quite a few MSPs in the industry. And through our launch of Innovative Automations as a company focusing on AI and automation, some MSPs are coming to us asking if we can help with their internal operations, as well as some of the client-facing AI and automation engagement. So that's kind of where we're going to start today. Hunter, if you will, kind of walk us through what we were approached with, and then we'll dive into some more of the details around that.
Yep. Customer came to us and they were looking to integrate two tools, Autotask and HubSpot. They leverage Autotask as their PSA system, where once that client becomes a customer, that's where they live. HubSpot is their sales platform, and that is where they do all of their deals or opportunities. But there wasn't a way to natively integrate these. There was a integration available, but it wasn't doing what they were wanting to achieve in terms of their goals and their targets. What we found was it could create these new companies, but there wasn't a way for it to sync like in a bidirectional or a unidirectional fashion. And so what we did was we leveraged our automation tools and we created a custom field in both of those platforms. And that is what we are leveraging to make this automation sync those companies or those contacts across both platforms, while that integration could not do that natively.
Gotcha. So, and we see this quite a bit, where an organization comes to us and there may or may not be a native connection to the other software that they use. 5 or 6 years ago, that was kind of how we made all of our decisions when it came to tools that we used. What integrates with the existing tools that we have, and how can we leverage that? Now we have the ability to basically anything that has an API available, we can actually start bringing in and integrating between the two. So if I understand correctly, using HubSpot as their CRM, where they do outbound sales, outreach, and communication with prospects and clients, using Autotask on the ticketing side. And so if I understand correctly, the native integration between those would copy some data, but not all the data that they were wanting to have show up in both places.
Correct. And what we had to do in our automation tools in order to achieve that was we manipulated that data. So we would get that data in the fashion it was in, but then we would use logic to format it into the specific date fields or specific lists that it was expecting to be returned into that.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point in terms of data transformation, because one of the key limitations that a lot of the softwares have between the way they can communicate is, for example, on a date field, you could have a date represented by 12/1/2025, and in another system, it's going to be represented as December 1st, 25. So making sure that you have that mapped out to where one is a text field, one is a date field, one may be a number field, and making sure that those two can communicate, that can be a challenge, right?
Exactly. And so with our automation tools, we're able to define if it needs to be an integer, if it needs to be a string, what kind of variables need to be passed into that platform. So it is something that can be created as a new company or be updated in order for those actions to take place.
And you mentioned something else in this, that a unidirectional sync is, I think, what you said. A lot of solutions have the ability to push one way or sometimes both ways, but making sure that all of the data is synchronizing. And a lot of times there's a desire to have a single source of truth. Tell me a little bit about the importance of that and understanding that workflow before you get into an automation like this.
Yep. So having those fields mapped and defined with that customer on exactly how they want that automation to behave. So following this customer, they wanted Autotask to be that source of truth. What we found was initially it was a bidirectional automation, but once the sales customers would be updated in HubSpot, that would push over into Autotask. And they had other integrations with Autotask like QuickBooks. And so when that customer would be updated in Autotask, it was affecting other systems. And so what we ended up doing was we made this a unidirectional automation. And so if there is a change in HubSpot, it finds that and then it's pushing the source of truth value, which is Autotask, back into HubSpot and correcting that so it is the same across all systems.
And that's important because a lot of this, we get the question, can we do this? And the answer is almost always yes. It's just a matter of whether there's an ROI and is it going to work as expected. But I think for most people, you really need to think through the logic of, do you really want everything syncing, or do you want a single source of truth? Because in that scenario, what I would imagine could happen is a salesperson gets in a hurry, misspells or miscapitalizes or something that makes that contact look different. It could overwrite or create a new company that now is, you've got duplicates you've got to go back and clean up. So it can kind of create more work if not thought out properly.
Exactly. Or even what we have seen is HubSpot and or Autotask, they have tools within the application themselves. So HubSpot, it can run workflows. So if a customer moves to a certain stage, then something will trigger. There's also enrichment tools. So it can update many companies at once. So if it is going off of, a date field, if this company is to update more recently than this company and this platform, then that needs to take place. So it's something to consider. And we saw those issues in this automation and why we had to switch gears and get something in place to make that work as expected.
Yeah. And that's something that a lot of times you don't necessarily see until you actually think through logically what could happen. So it brings up another point that when we're looking at integrating solutions and having fields copied and replicated, it's really important to make sure that from a data integrity perspective, if you will speak to, kind of the recommendations around backups and, what you have in place before you get to that point, because last thing in the world is you want, your existing data blown out by something that's unexpected.
Absolutely. So what we look to do first when we are creating and testing this automation is we look to have a sandbox or a demo environment in hopefully both of the platforms. If it's not something that is able to happen, then what we would do is we would create a custom field. And what we can do is use that to pull in the data and restrict that data to only the companies that have that field, for example. So it's definitely preferred that we get a sandbox so we're not integrating or even interacting at all with that production data. But there are ways that we can work around it. But the thing that we always look for is that the applications that we are going to automate is that the customer has a backup solution in place, whether that be on-premise solution that they have themselves, or what we would ultimately recommend is a backup with that software vendor directly, where they're performing a daily, monthly backup of whatever that needs to look like for that customer and their business needs.
Yep. Sandboxing is so beneficial if you can get to that point, because it gives you that playground where you can test and see, is this functioning the way we want it to? And if not, how do we adjust without affecting anybody or any data that's in production today? So in terms of what they're doing from this point forward, this is they're originally syncing contacts, companies, notes, things like that. I think they have plans to make that more robust, include things like tickets and to assign to-do items and opportunities. So basically, once you get this building block there, you can keep stacking on it, correct?
Correct. Yep. So now that we've created those sub workflows and interacted with their API, we can reuse some of those sub workflows in this automation, and we can continue to layer upon. So from the data it's already getting, we can just add additional actions in that same workflow. And like you said, continue to layer on. So right now it's doing where it's creating new companies or contacts. It already has all of that data. So we can just add an additional step below that where it can then go and create new opportunities or create a new to-do, whatever that needs to look like and whatever they're looking to achieve. We just need to make sure that we fully map that out with the customer and those fields and identify exactly what they're wanting that automation to look like in the end goal.
Yeah. And that's, what we see is most organizations start with a single use case. Then they think, okay, well, this is working really well. How do we extend that or expand upon it? And I think that's, once you get that functionality there and the system's talking in the same language, then it becomes, how do we make this more and more valuable? Because, with HubSpot as well as Autotask, there's automation built into both of those platforms. So now that we can connect that data, we can extend the automations that are natively running and make this even more functional in terms of value. So key takeaways here, I think, are making sure that people think through what are the source of truth? How do you want to map that data? Making sure that you've got the ability to sandbox, the environments and test without affecting things. And then thinking long-term, could we expand upon this and extend the functionality? So any last items that you would say to include in that as you're thinking through what could be automated?
The only thing that I will think of is using those software applications that you have in place. And like I said before, and Shane said, there are automations in those applications. So if you are using automations already in there, those would definitely be good candidates that could all be bundled into a single automation and layer it upon that even further if there are specific things that automation is not able to achieve that you're looking and hoping to get.
Absolutely. And we're talking about really two systems that they're initially syncing and moving data back and forth. This could expand, like you said, to QuickBooks, to basically whatever they have in place. We could build that into these type of automations. And the last question I have for you, Hunter, at Innovative Automations, we have the ability to help clients envision this and think through this, right?
Exactly. And we would like to walk through the tools, make sure you have the correct licensing, make sure we're reviewing those fields, and making sure that we have an overall idea of what your goal is with this automation, because it's certainly achievable if you pull us in at the tail end, but it's a lot easier if we're included from the get-go.
Yep, absolutely. That way you get a true ROI on it before you get too far down the rabbit hole anyway. So awesome information. Appreciate the insight on what we've been able to build for this client, and looking forward to diving into the next one with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shane.
Thanks, Hunter.
Thanks for tuning in to AI and Automation in Action. If today's conversation sparked ideas about how AI or automation could improve your operations, we'd love to continue that discussion with you. Join us next time as we showcase another real-world implementation and break down how to deploy AI responsibly and effectively. And if you want to brainstorm with our team, email us anytime at ideas@innovativeautomations.ai. Until next time.